Welcome to my I Am Setsuna review. Since the beginning, I've wanted to call this game I Am Setsuna. I don't know why, it's just like embedded in my head. And yes, Satsuma as in the little oranges. I don't know, I'm weird. I Am Setsuna is developed by Tokyo RPG Factory and published by Square Enix. And it is out on PlayStation 4 and PC. And you should play it. Just getting that out there right off the bat. You should probably play this game. But before I start gushing too much about that, let us start with the basics, which is that I Am Setsuna plays, feels, and looks like an old school JRPG in the sense that you have the top-down view, you have the turn-based battles. In fact, if you're familiar with Chrono Trigger, the battle system will be very, very familiar to you. You have treasure chests scattered throughout villages and throughout the world. You have NPCs that kind of wander around in like aimless directions and repeat the same lines of dialogue to you. So that's how I Am Setsuna plays, and that's kind of what it is. Yeah. Before I talk about the story, I just want you to know that this is spoiler free. I won't ruin anything for you because, like I've said, what have I said many times, friends? Spoilers are basically death reincarnated. Yeah, that's what I said. I think that's what I said. That's what I mean to say. So yeah, don't worry about me spoiling anything that it's not already readily available, i.e. on the back of the game. So, I Am Setsuna follows a young woman named Setsuna, who has been chosen as the village sacrifice, and now she hails from a certain village. And what this village does is they send young women out, or women in general, I don't know if they have to be young, to sacrifice themselves when the monsters of the world start getting a little too rambunctious. They send out these sacrifices, and for whatever reason, the monsters seem to kind of chill out for a while afterward. I think it's about 10 years, and then another one goes out. But things have happened, and it hasn't been a full 10 years, but the monsters are already getting kind of crazy, so out goes Setsuna. Now you, the player, assume the role and the person and the emotions of a mercenary named Ender, and it's spelled E-N-D-I-R. So in my head, I think I was saying Endir, but Endir just sounds weird. So I'll call him Ender, Endir, E-Man. I'm gonna call him E-Man. So you, the player, assume the role of E-Man. You make choices for him, although I'm not entirely sure that those choices actually have consequence. There may be one point in the game when they do. Well, there is one point in the game, but I'm not going to tell you. And yeah, so you are him. That said, he doesn't need to be in the party at all times. How the game works is if you can have 3 people out at a time, you know, that are visible on screen of your party members. And there's about, I don't know how many party members there are. I can't remember, 7-ish? Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. Anyway, so you have your 3 visible characters on screen, and any time that a cutscene ensues, all of your characters kind of come out and they fan out and they all partake, and that is when you make decisions for E-Man. But like I said, he doesn't always have to be in the party. So that is the role that you assume as the player. But along the way, you will meet new characters, and you will interact with them, and you will learn about them and their struggles and their personal vendettas, and there are twists and turns and moments throughout the game. So it's your typical JRPG. Tokyo RPG Factory did a really, really good job at creating a sense, a mood of doom and gloom with I Am Setsuna. I mean, you have the snow that's constantly falling, which is very, it can be very beautiful and peaceful, but at the same time, God, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word I'm looking for. What is this word? Let me reach into the air. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to, nope, it's not coming to me. I tried to eat it and everything, it didn't come to me. Anyway, between the constant gray skies and the snow falling to the soundtrack, which is just fucking gorgeous. Now, I'm not really a piano person, but and I can't remember the guy's name, it's slipping my mind. God, I can't remember anything today. But whoever composed the soundtrack and put it together, damn, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's a little eerie sometimes. It's just, so, you know, all of that with the whole premise of the game and the snow and music and what we're doing, we're taking a girl out to be sacrificed. It's definitely a doomy, gloomy game. Really, it's really nicely done. It's beautiful. Beautifully sad. I can't, fucking word, what is it? What really sold me on I Am Setsuna from the very get-go was the advertised old school JRPG feel that Tokyo RPG Factory was going for, and they nailed it, man. They have the top-down view, like I said earlier, the 3 characters on screen, the random treasure chest, the NPCs that walk around aimlessly, the multiple villages and towns. All that said though, there are some things that I feel like could have been executed a little better, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. And I would say, I'm just gonna say it now. If you like old school JRPGs, you know, Super Nintendo, PlayStation era, and those where you grew up on, and you have lots of fond memories tied to that genre, you can just stop watching this and just play the game, just buy it. I mean, it's really special, like, you know, I grew up on that kind of stuff. And within the first 15 minutes of playing the game, I was like misty-eyed. And I don't even know why. It's not like anything amazing like happened. I didn't know the story well enough to be blown away. It was just, I sat down, I had the controller in my hand, and it felt familiar. I knew what I was playing, I knew what I was getting into, and it was like, man, like I have not experienced this in so long. And it was just a really cool, almost magical feeling. So yeah, there's that. Oh God. So I don't want to talk too much about the story and the characters of I Am Setsuna, just because of, like I said, spoilers suck and I hate them. So there's really not a lot for me to say here, except for I feel like the story, it's a great story. Follow it, play it, you'll enjoy it. The characters, most of them, so each character is vastly different from the other, which is nice and appreciated. I feel like, though, if I were to go, let's say, to Tokyo RPG's factory and their little game development, like character planning room, where they have like documents upon documents upon documents about the characters of these games, and what they're about and their backstory, because you know how people like create vast histories for every character, but that usually never makes it into the game. It's just there to help them sculpt and make the characters and help choose the reactions, blah blah blah. Anyway, I feel like every single one of these characters has like probably like books upon books upon books of papers, but you don't really get a lot of that in the game. They're interesting, and like I said, they're vastly different, and they all have their own motives and whatnot. I just wish that there would have been more one-on-one personal interactions with the characters. You know, it's about a 20 to 25 hour game, and these people obviously are in a rush because they have to get Setsuna to where she needs to be. So I get that they can't take a lot of breaks, but I just feel like I never really got to know these characters all that well. And it would have been nice to have like formed a deep connection with them. I mean, I think of games like, it's not fair for me to compare this game to Final Fantasy IX, for example, like one of my favorite games. I'm just putting that out there. You know, by the end of the game, granted, it's a lot more than a 20-hour game, but I felt a lot more connected to the characters, and like Breath of Fire 3. And like I said, these are all much longer games. But the point is, I felt a lot more connected to them, and I feel like I should have gotten at least half of that out of I Am Setsuna. Not necessarily an awful thing, not a huge knock against the game. It's probably more of a backhanded compliment, because I think the characters were so well planned out that I wanted more time with them. Yeah. So yeah, I totally, absolutely recommend this game if you are an old school JRPG fan. I know I've said that a million times during this video, but I want to make sure that that is completely understood before I kind of start talking about the things that I feel like could have been better, because unfortunately I can't really talk about the things that I really enjoyed about I Am Setsuna because of spoilers. So yeah, just there we go. There, just want to make sure that's clear, okay? Okay. Now I know the developers were definitely going for an old school JRPG feel. However, the dungeon layout and the other dungeon layout, there's like two that I can think of, are very similar and a little too similar, I think. They're not very inspired. I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for. Most of the dungeons works like this. You walk down a corridor and it opens up to a square area where there are monsters. Okay, cool. Then there's a path going up, path going left. You go up to the path up, it's a dead end, treasure chest on the end. You come back, monsters don't respawn unless you leave the area, so that's good. And then you go to the other path, and then you walk down that corridor, and then again there's a square space with the monsters in it, and then like two splitting paths, and you gotta pick the right one. Anyway, that's okay. I mean, I know that's what a lot of games did back in the day, but I feel like with today's technology, or whatever you want to call it, it could have been a little more modernized. Not to mention that the textures of the dungeons are very similar. I think they're identical, actually. They all look like little ice caverns. And then there are two other dungeons that I can think of off the top of my head, and those also use the same layout, and they're supposed to be two very different things, but they use the same layout. I mean, different like paths and air, but same like ground textures and same like switches and little elevator thingies. So that made them not very enjoyable, just because, I mean, you know, I was looking forward to seeing a certain part of the game, which had been kind of built up as being these ancient ruins, but it just kind of used the same dungeon layout as something that I had done like 3 hours prior in a completely different, unrelated area. So that was a little bit of a bummer. Kind of on that same note would be the villages in I Am Setsuna. Now granted, I know everything is covered in snow, and by the way, if I haven't mentioned this, everything is covered in snow. It's constantly falling, it's everywhere you go, unless you go like inside a house or like a dungeon or something. All you're gonna see is get very used to the colors black, white, and gray, because you'll see a lot of them. That said, it's still gorgeous and beautiful, but yeah, the villages are just a little too similar. They look too much alike. I mean, I know that the houses are placed differently, and some have like hills and some have walkways, some don't, but it wasn't like every time I came across a new village, I was excited to explore it and see what there is to do. The last thing I want to talk about, and I don't really know if I would consider this a bad thing, it could be a good thing depending on your playstyle, is that you acquire abilities not through leveling up. In fact, the only thing that I think goes up when you level up is your attack power and defense, or it might depend on which class you are, I'm not sure. So basically you don't learn new skills when you level up. Instead, you learn these skills by selling the materials you get for defeating bad guys, and then you sell these materials for something called Sprite Knights or however you want to pronounce it, and those are basically your abilities. Now each character can equip a certain amount of these abilities at once, and there's a lot of them. Too many to the point where I became a little overwhelmed, and I just said fuck it, and I just hoped what I had was the best that I could do with the amount of effort I put into it. But if you are a tactical person and you really like want to get into the nitty-gritty, you're gonna have a blast with it. For me, I prefer more of a streamlined thing. Oh, level 10, you learn Cure, or level 11, you learn Thrust, you did something like that. Well, I think that covers what I want to talk about. Again, I walked away from that game feeling really good. I'm really happy that I played it. I'm really happy I spent the 20 to 25 hours playing it. It's 40 bucks. And you know, like I said, if you are a fan of old school JRPGs, or just actually a fan of old school JRPGs, I would highly recommend that you play this game. Just keep in mind some of the things I brought up to you, and I think you will have a wonderful time with it. Like I said, I know I did, and it was a really fun blast from the past, and I hope we see more things like this in the future. I really do. Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I will help answer them to the best of my ability. Bye guys!